This is the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast, episode number 19.
The good-looking radio guy you love to hear. Okay, I added that part.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. My name is John Melly, and this is the podcast dedicated to teaching in-depth and advanced marketing strategies for people in the voiceover and audio production professions. My goal is to help you make more money by showing you ways to leverage your time, charge more for your talents, and allow you to spend more time doing the things you want to do in your life. Hey there, it's John. Welcome to this episode. How are you? Thanks for spending some time with me today. The podcast continues to grow. I am really excited. Just seems like a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about crossing the 10,000 download threshold, and we are quickly approaching 11,000. As of this recording, there have been 10,824 downloads of all the different episodes of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. That's so cool. And I have you to thank for that and sharing the podcast with others and coming across the podcast and iTunes and Stitcher and all the different ways that people are finding out about the podcast. It's so cool. And we're getting people from all over the world listening. And the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group in Facebook, give a quick shout out to some new members who've joined that group. Mike Tarnell. How are you, Mike? Matt Warren Steele. Matt, thank you very much. Zach Meissner. JP Sharma. He contacted me all the way from India. Now, that's not very far for you, JP, because you're there. But for us in the U.S., that's like an ocean and a half away. No matter which way you spin the globe, right? Anyway, thanks for your nice note and for joining the podcast Facebook group and for listening. Tanya Buchanan from Toronto, Canada. Bank Voice. I don't have the name there, but a name of the person, but Bank Voice. Bank Voice works at International Voice Bank. Joanna May Riley, she sent me a nice note and asked me a couple of questions about the paper plate mailing. She thought it was a little out there, but it's intended to be out there. And I messaged her back regarding that. Brett C. Riley, who I think was invited by Joanna. Thank you for joining, Brett. And Heidi Schneller-Mina. She's a teacher at Pike Township. Thanks, Heidi. Thanks for joining. And also a quick message to Diana Birdsall. Diana, you had given a comment. I had asked a question about things you want covered in upcoming episodes. And one of the things that you said off the top of your head, number one, was top of mind awareness, tips and tricks on how to stay there in a good way, especially if people haven't hired you yet. And Diana, this is such a coincidence. I was preparing my notes for this week's episode when I got your stuff, and I said, this is going to be perfect. Also, on the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group in Facebook, Harry Legg shared a video that he's in that is also dealing with this very topic. It talks about his story of transitioning to voiceover and tips on how to get your voiceover career started. I'm going to talk about these things in more detail when I get started in the content. But before we do that, I just want to ask you a question. Have you ever read a book, or is there an author that you really enjoy reading? If they've come up with a series of books, you just devour them when they come out? Well, Ann and I were at my parents' house in Maine. We were visiting for Memorial Day weekend, and I do a lot of reading. I'm constantly reading. Most of my reading material is about marketing and business, health and fitness. Also, I've been interested in gardening. I think I showed you some pictures in the last episode of what's going on in my backyard with my potatoes and broccoli and corn and all that kind of stuff. So I've been reading books on organic gardening, and I had gotten away from fun reading. And so we're at my parents' house, and I saw this Tom Clancy novel. And the title of the book is Locked On, and I started to read it. And I've read most of Tom Clancy's stuff. I love it. So I asked my dad if I could borrow the book. I took it home. It's like an 850-page book. It was about a week and a half ago I started reading it. I'm only about 100 pages away from finishing it. I mean, I've been reading about 100 pages a night and being up all hours, and I got to get up at 5:30 in the morning to go work on with my trainer and stuff like that. And I was up till 12:30 the night before. I rolled over and looked at the clock, and I went, ugh, what did I do? Why did I do that? But I got so captivated by the story. It's a real page turner. I guess that's where the expression comes from. So I've really been enjoying that. It's been fun to just read for fun, get caught up in a story. So now let me just stop for a second and take a step back from what just happened in this podcast. And I want to be completely transparent with you. Why did I just tell you that story? And if you've listened to any of these podcast episodes, I structure them in a way on purpose. And I typically start an episode with telling you a story about what's going on in my world, what I like, what I don't like, what I'm working on, challenges I've had, what books I'm reading. You may ask yourself, why do I do this? Well, I do it on purpose because I want you to get to know me. And we're building a relationship here. People are reaching out, making comments on Facebook, directly on the podcast page at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com, through Twitter, Google Hangout groups, LinkedIn, a lot of folks from LinkedIn reaching out too. And so there's this dialogue that's taking place. So I tell you these stories. People from a very early age learn that stories, first of all, they're entertaining, but they're a way for people to pass on life lessons. So we are from a very early age drawn towards story. Tell me a story. Read me a story. Whomever you would ask that of. And we're captivated by stories. Facebook, social media, they're all very short stories. You're never going to guess what happened today. Or look at this beautiful sunset I'm seeing right now. And you're sharing all of these little stories. So step back for just another second. When the podcast turned a year old, back in March, I put out a survey. People said they wanted marketing tactics and more episodes. So in an attempt to do just that, I have a very advanced marketing strategy that I'm going to share with you today. And it's the power of story. It's the power of using your story, your voiceover journey, and using that story in a way to grow your voiceover business. I'm going to give you a bunch of resources for you to check out. So if you're listening in the car, come back and listen to this episode again. I mentioned earlier in the Voiceover Marketing Podcast group in Facebook, I mentioned that I had pinned a video up at the top of the thread that Harry Legg had shared with us, and it's his story. And these are his words. It's his quick story of transitioning to voiceover and tips on how to get your VO career started. And I watched the video, and it's a great story. And Harry, this is a compliment to you. He did something in the video that was very powerful, because he talks about, and being a radio guy, I hear this frequently myself. He talks about the hesitancy or the resistance that ad agencies and other creative agencies have toward radio people. There's a bias, and there's a reason for the bias, because, hey, everybody, if you're within the sound of my voice, then you need to get to ABC Car Wash right now. I mean, that happens. When you listen to national spots or other radio spots, they're not looking for that sound. And so one of the things he addressed, and we call these objections or points of resistance or elephants in the room. What he did up front was he talked about the elephant in the room of being a radio guy trying to transition into voiceover and acting, and how he addressed that problem and the steps he took to correct it or give himself another skill set to be able to do more radio commercials and television commercials and narrations and address the, oh, you're just a radio guy. We don't like radio guys. I've done this myself, but I've also targeted my marketing in a different way, so that isn't even an issue with a lot of the clients that I do work with or do work for. So he uses his story in a constructive way to market himself. Harry, if you didn't do that intentionally, then you've got a great marketing piece there that you can use, and I think you did do it intentionally, and it's a great piece. And the other thing is if you just listen to his voice, you go, oh, yeah, we understand why you do what you do. I mean, what a set of pipes. So Go and watch that video because there are things in there that you can pull from it and learn. And Harry, thank you again for sharing that. That's another thing is I want people to share ideas in the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast group on Facebook, but also at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. So feel free to share those things with me and the audience. The other resource that I want to point out to you is if you go to the show notes, and this is a very special download for you, and I think you may want to do this to get this download and follow along with it so that you can see the different elements that I strategically place throughout this, is if you go to episode 19 at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com, you will see a link to a page on my other website, johnmalley.com. Just enter your name and your email address, and I will email you a free copy of the marketing piece that I use when I'm working with a new client. It's an autoresponder, so you're going to get an email right away from me, and you can download it right away. It's basically my story. What Harry did in video, I did it in print form. And so it's my story of my journey into voiceover, how this all happened. So go to voiceovermarketingpodcast.com, episode 19, click the link to get the download. So how did this all come about? Last fall, I had started a voiceover marketing mastermind group, and I had given the members of the group a homework assignment. The reason why I gave them this homework assignment before we started meeting was I had conversations with all of the prospective members before they were accepted in the group. And one of the themes that kept coming up was that they expressed a hesitation or a reluctance to promote themselves. And people were at different places with that. But most folks said, I know I got to do this marketing and talk about how good I am, but I'm really not that comfortable with it. So what I asked them to do was to write their story. What challenges did they have to overcome? How did they get interested in voiceover? When did they start doing voiceover? Where are they in that journey? What successes have they had? What problems have they had? Did they have people saying, what are you going to do that for? People, the naysayers. And did they have people that encouraged them, people that were mentors, took them under their wing and helped them along? All of those things matter. There's drama there. So what I asked them to do is write their story. And some folks did some neat things. They wrote them all out. Some people did bullet points. Some people recorded their story. Others gave me these long stories, kind of like what I had written. And it was really, really cool. And the reason I asked them to do this, because I asked them another question. How many felt that the only way to grow a business is mostly looking for clients and getting them to pick you, cold calling and auditioning. And really, when you think about it, auditioning, if you haven't worked with them before, it's kind of a cold call. Chasing after clients. What I'm all about is rather than chasing after opportunities, other opportunities that people have, I'm about attracting people to you to say, hey, John, I'd like you to do this for me. And have more and more people coming to you, predisposed to buy from you, already sold on you, saying, that's who I want to use. So what I'm about to share with you is a fairly advanced marketing strategy. And if you go and you download that story that I'm offering to you, I'm going to invite you to start to write your own origin story. If you look at any character that has lasted over time, if you look at any comic book hero, you'll know that there are these origin stories. Peter Parker, who was Spider-Man, he got bit by a radioactive spider and changed his blood, and he was able to get the powers and the skills of a spider. He could spin webs, he could cling to walls and climb and all that kind of stuff. Superman, he came from the planet Krypton, and he's got superhuman strength because of the gravity, and kryptonite's what is, his Achilles heel is. There's always a weakness, too, to these heroes. And our weaknesses could be obstacles that we had to overcome. You look at other characters, Wonder Woman. You look at James Bond. You know things about James Bond. You know, Savile Row is where he gets his suits. Martini, shaken, not stirred. You know, License to Kill, 007. You know, all of these things that you know about characters. Look at books that you read. What are things that you know about the characters that you enjoy reading? All have their little things. Ann and I are watching this TV show on DVD called Burn Notice. And the hero of that show loves yogurt. You know, it's just these little personality quirks that they insert into the show that round out the character. There are things that I include in my story from time to time. I've talked about several times that I was a meat cutter to pay for college. I talk about how I was a political science major in college instead of being a communications major in college. I used to be a lobbyist for the real estate industry. I worked in politics. I worked in government. I did all of these things. And it's like, how did you get into voiceover from all of that? Well, that's my story. And I use that story to market my products and services to people. People are interested in stories. Here's the thing. When I meet people or when they connect with me, they say, you know what, John? I feel like I already know you. How powerful is that? I give them this story and they know things about me because I make sure they know things about me. So what I would suggest to you is take some time and start thinking about your journey. When did you first get interested in voiceover? Did you like watching cartoons? Were you the person that was singing along to all the commercial jingles on television and radio? Were you watching Saturday Night Live and doing imitations of the characters? You know, I mean, what's your story? People want to know. How many times do you go to cocktail parties and have people say, so how did you get into voiceover? How did you get into that? People want to hear the story. Give it to them. Use it. Leverage it. Some things that, you may want to watch for in my story when you go and you download that marketing piece. Whenever I do a presentation, people ask me my story. How did I get into it? Another resource I want to share with you is another podcast. I was interviewed by a client of mine, and the name of the podcast is One Thing Required. And the host of the show is Will Lee, and he interviewed me. He said, I really like your story. And what I did was I sent him this marketing piece that I'm telling you about. And he came back to me and he said, you know what, John, I just read your story. I want to interview you. So he interviewed me, I think a couple of months ago, maybe not that long ago. But now I'm in his podcast. And if you go to the show notes, again, there's another link where you can link to the episode at onethingrequired.com. It's episode 6. And you can listen to that and you'll hear my story. You'll hear how I use the story when people are asking me. And it's one of those things that I constantly make sure I'm putting out there. It is intentional. So if you read this story, you will learn how I made money to pay for college. You will learn who gave me my first radio and kindled that desire and interest in radio and, as a result, voiceovers. You will learn about some of the obstacles that I had to overcome to get into radio, how it almost all slipped away from me, how it was, was never going to happen for me, and the big leap that I took in order to make it happen. You will learn where I fit in the birth order of my family. Everything in that story, I wrote it in a way that will interest someone, and I wrote it in colorful language. And I give it to people because I want people to get to know me. And one of the things that's very powerful in your marketing is people like to buy from people they know, like, and trust. And an easy way for people to get to know, like, and trust me is to tell them about myself, but not do it in a way that's bragging. And if I write my story and I hand it out as a marketing piece, it's my story. Does this make sense? I hope it does. This is not put together a trifold brochure and get a neat business card and artwork for your demo and all that. And I caught a little flack from folks about the previous episode about mailing CDs. Who mails CDs anymore, John? Well, a CD is something that's tangible, and it's hard for you to discard it. They sit around. You can delete an email with one click of a mouse. You give them something with a high perceived value, and people hold on to it. And that's what we want, is we want our marketing to stick around. I'm kind of around a little all over the place here, but all of this stuff ties together. We want people to know, like, and trust us, and we want our message to stick around long enough so that they have the opportunity to consume the content that we want them to consume, which is going to reinforce their decision to hire us for upcoming projects. It gets the dialogue started, the story. I just had a conversation with somebody who has an ad agency. I met her a few years ago, and she contacted me about being her voiceover and radio commercial production resource for this proposal that she's been putting together. And to me, it seemed kind of a surprise. I was like, oh, wow, yeah, I haven't talked to her in a couple of years. But she said, well, you know what? I've been getting your newsletter, and I've been getting your emails and your podcast updates and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, you know what? Why not include him in this group? Now, I started this dialogue a couple of years ago. If this pans out, this could be a great opportunity. I don't know. We're going to find out. But I've at least established a contact, and someone gave me a shot at something really cool, which could be a great addition to my business. And here's the other thing. You write this thing once, and you've got a marketing piece that you can use over and over and over and over and over again. It leverages your time. It does the work for you. People say, how did you get started in voiceover? You email them the story. You print the story and put it in the mail to them. You include it in your marketing piece. Make it entertaining. Stepping back a little bit about, the things that I include about being where my birth order is, who gave me the radio, doing what I was told, and then realizing that I could make my own decisions, and working hard and overcoming disappointments. All of these things are things that everyone has experience with and can relate to. It's like, oh yeah, something like that happened to me. That's important. I'm kind of digressing a little bit, but again, it all ties together. Companies don't make buying decisions. People make buying decisions. People who work for companies make the buying decisions. We're not barcodes. We're people. So people are going to make decisions on who to hire. So we get to know them on a person-to-person level. And a story can help you do that. You want to put things in there about your interests, your hobbies, the things that you overcome, the experiences of your life. Because all of these things that people can relate to on some level, they're called paths of entry. And I always put references of my past experiences in the podcast because I want people to know about them. I share life experiences in my podcast because they're paths of entry. People who listen to this podcast know that I like rock music. I play the drums. I listen to Rush, and I'm a big fan of Neil Peart, who is the drummer for Rush. I'm an admirer of his talent. And I make sure people know that. It's intentional. And I can't tell you how many people reach out to me and say, hey, I love that little clip that you put in there. I like that band too. I used to play the drums. Or I was a history major in college. Or, those are the things that people grab hold of. And then you become relatable, and then people say, hey, I like working with them. They seem like a nice person. Let's give them a shot. Now, that's not the only way that you get hired. You got to have the talent to back it up. But if you've got that, if you've got your chops, and it's a decision between two people and one they don't know, they haven't worked with, or they don't feel like they know well enough, but the other person, I know about them. They did this, that, and the other thing, and they're more relatable. Well, that's the person who's probably going to get the job. So you want to make that as easy for people to get to as possible. And writing out your story can become a very powerful marketing piece. Write your story, put it on your webpage. Here's another thing. How many times, if you go to a webpage, one of the first pages you click on is the About page? Happens a lot, right? You want to know about these people. What's their story? Give it to them. You can record it. Do what Harry did and create a video with it. You could make an MP3 and put it on your page. Write up an article and give it to new clients like I've done. Make it a part of the fabric of your marketing. And don't be afraid to put something in your story that may bother or turn off some people. Your story can act as a filter and keep people away from you that you may not want to do work with. And the opposite is true. It's going to attract others who will want to only work with you because of your story, because there are things in your story that they can relate to. And there's nothing unethical about doing this. I've talked about this in the past, and so I said, well, aren't you kind of being manipulative? And it's like, well, no. There's nothing unethical about it. Everything in this story is true. You can't make stuff up. Don't lie. I mean, that's rule number one. First, that's the right thing to do, is to tell the truth. But it's good for business, because that undermines the whole know, like, and trust element in your marketing. Everything in the story has to be true. It attracts clients. It makes them comfortable with you. We want people to be comfortable with us doing business with us. I hope this makes sense. It's, like I said, it's an advanced strategy, but basically write your story. Look at the video that I've pinned on the Voiceover Marketing Podcast Facebook group that Harry Legg put together. He put together a great video. Go to the show notes for this episode 19, at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. You'll see the link. Enter your name and email address, and you'll get a free copy of the marketing piece that I use. Also, if you'd like to listen to someone turn the tables on me and interview me, you can go, again, to episode 19. There's a link for a podcast at onethingrequired.com. I was interviewed, and you can hear how I use this story in my marketing. That's all the time we have for this episode right now. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. I went over a lot of topics, but I really tried to center it around the power of using your story in your marketing, weaving that into your efforts in attracting clients, working with current clients. Let your current clients get to know you a little better too. It's a very powerful tool. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. Also on Voiceover Marketing Podcast group on Facebook. And also, if you go to voiceovermarketingpodcast.com, you're going to see on the right-hand side an orange button. It's an opportunity it says, leave us a message. Click it and use the microphone on your computer or in your smartphone and leave me a recorded message. I'd love to have your comments and feedback. I'd love to put you in the show. Until next week, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Our program originates in the Boston studios. We hope you'll join us again. Until then, we bid you au revoir, keep your chin up, and the best of luck.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to it at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it would be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and future topics you'd like discussed at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. And if you'd like more information on one-on-one coaching with me and mastermind group opportunities where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. Now go out there and share your voice with the world.